Alrighty, for our final season preview, we are going to be doing the Nashville Predators today. Finally, have a good excuse to wear one of my favorite hats in my collection, and it actually fits. But we are joined by Daniel Collins, aka Sweatpants Jesus, on Twitter. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me. Any chance to talk about the Nashville Predators? I am always game, and yeah, that is a sick hat. So, where'd you snag that bad boy?
This is from Selly Hockey. I would argue they make the best hockey hats in the game.
You're gonna have to send me the link to that because I like that a lot. I was actually gonna put my Preds hat on, but I just got this new hat from where I work right now, so I just wanted to throw that on too. But yeah, big hat guy, so I'll have to check that out.
I'll definitely shoot you the link.
Oh
So
yeah,
we got you on for Nashville season preview.
yep.
Not arguably, I think it's pretty much universally recognized. They were the big splash of the offseason, got two of the biggest names on the market. So I want to ask you, what's the vibe like amongst Preds fans going into this season? You guys got to be excited.
Yeah, I mean, I jokingly said this on a couple of other things that I've done with my friend Gretzky Betskys, and I do a show with my job at Betting News every week talking about hockey called Puck It, and it felt like Christmas came early in July when both of these moves happened. They also kind of both happened back to back with the Predators getting Steven Stamkos, and then it felt like 20 minutes later the Marcia Show news got announced as well. So I mean, Brady Shea also is a huge add to this blue line as well, which is something that people kind of forget. Scott Wedgwood's going to be nice between the pipes behind UC Saros too. So the Predators made the most splash moves, like you said, but I'm super excited about how this team's core is going to kind of mesh with these new guys. Last year, the Predators kind of surprised a lot of people, myself included, really, with the overperformance of a lot of like younger players. Like people kind of were like, okay, Ryan Johansson's not in the building anymore. They got rid of Matt Duchene. Kind of looked like they were going to go through a little bit of a rebuilding mode. Whereas I think they allowed a lot of these younger guys, like, the likes of Luke Evangelista, Philip Tomasino, Tommy Novak, to kind of, they kind of said, all right, boys, what you got? And they really stepped up and proved themselves. So I think that kind of gave the front office and Barry Trotz and the rest of those guys like the confidence to go out there and get superstars and kind of go push all the chips in right now. Also pay Philip Forsberg big money to be the guy on this team, and also confirm UC Saros' status as one of the best tendies in hockey too. So I think the moves were awesome. It affirmed, yeah, as a Preds fan, it's like, you get new toys and it's like, woohoo, new toys. But I'm super excited on how they're going to fit in with the guys that have been kind of building up this franchise, like in Roman Yossi, Philip Forsberg, and UC Saros, and kind of seeing how those cornerstones fit in with these new, fun, flashy toys.
It's a great way to put it. I love that analogy with the fun, flashy toys. So, as a Preds fan and a hockey fan, if would you say that with these additions, you can put the Nashville Predators in the same category as what most people would consider the tier ones, the Rangers, the Oilers, the Panthers, the Stars, like those. I feel like those four, they all made the conference finals. You think it's safe to put these guys in that same category of cup contender?
As a fan, absolutely. I mean, I think just as like an analyst of the league, you got to obviously see how it plays out. But on paper, I mean, they have everything necessary. Last season, they really surprised. Like I said, they went on that crazy run where they won like 18 or 19 or something like that in a row, and kind of snuck into the playoffs, right? But they really lacked depth. They had a really awesome front top line with Philip Forsberg, et cetera. And like they were able to get a lot of wins that probably they didn't really deserve to get at that particular time. But now they have superstars, and then those guys that were kind of performing and moving up in the ranks, like I said, from a rookie perspective, are now like have that experience, and then they're going to be on the second and third lines of this team. So now they have depth up and down those first three lines, and that's why I think they can truly compete to be one of the best teams in hockey this year. I mean, I've bet on them to win the Central, which I think is excellent value for them to win the Central. I mean, the Stars, like you mentioned, are a juggernaut, and they're going to have another probably great season. But the Avalanche in the Central Conference are, I think, a little bit down this year. They obviously have superstars in McKinnon and McCarr, et cetera. But like I don't think they have great depth. And as we know with hockey, you're one or two injuries away from really struggling if you don't have good depth. So I think the Central is up in the air. I think the Predators have all the pieces in place if they can stay healthy too, to compete to be top of the Central, maybe even top in the Western Conference. And the fan in me would love for them to compete for a President's Trophy. But I think to answer your question, that they absolutely have all the pieces necessary to compete to be one of the best teams in hockey and be in that tier one conversation throughout the rest of the season.
Ever since they were in the cup final against the Pens in what was that, 2016, 15?
2016, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they've struggled to get out of the first round. I think they've only done that once since then. In your opinion, what do they need to do, or what did they need to bring in to get that done this season? I know you mentioned the depth. I think, the performance of the young guys, you nailed it. Novak, Evangelista, and Tomasino, those guys are fantastic. But is there anything else that you can sort of point to and says, this needs to get better if they want to be a serious threat for the third round?
I think that I kind of when I talked on another show about this, I was thinking about, like, yeah, you bring in these splash guys, and obviously, Steven Stamkos is a future Hall of Famer, and I mean, Marcia Show is one of the best two-way players in hockey right now, I would say, and you bring in those types of guys, and you go, well, those guys need to be great. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. But like, to me, I think that the two X factors for me for this team to really be the contender that they potentially could be, I think that Philip Forsberg has to take that next step to become a potential superstar this season. They paid him like one. He had a great year last year, scoring over 40 goals. I think, I think he had 94 points last year. If he can take that next step and be because Stammer and, Marcia Show are fantastic, but they're kind of, I would say Marcia is still in the prime of his career, but Stammer's on the back half of that prime. Philip Forsberg's 30 years old. This is his chance to become a household name in the NHL this season. And I think if that happens, this team has a real good opportunity to threaten to win a cup. The second portion of that, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is UC Saros. UC Saros got the backing of the front office by giving them a big contract this season. They moved on from Askarov, who was a really awesome, highly touted recruit. They decided, no, we want to stick with our guy, give him the big money, who's been awesome for the last 3 seasons since he took over for Pekka Rinne between the pipes for the Preds. If he has a Vezina type year, and if Philip Forsberg steps up, then I think that this team can flirt with a cup. Those are my two kind of X factors, that are kind of like not the overall like obvious ones of like, yeah, Stammer and Marcia need to be great. But if those two guys can have big seasons, I think that this team can, like you said, get out of the first round and flirt with, getting back to that 2016 glory that I so miss. So,
it's crazy how good Forsberg was last season after literally just watching the brand new NHL Amazon series that dropped literally 8 hours ago this morning. I've been binging that today, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Forsberg, he gets his feature, and he's playing through this gigantic swollen like bruise on his ankle all year long, and he's getting laser therapy and he's getting all this shit done. And his wife is basically just like, yeah, he just acts like it's not there. And I think, when this guy's fully healthy, gives it time to rest, 94 points, 48 goals. I mean, this guy could easily be a 50 goal scorer next year, or this year rather.
Yeah, I think that, again, sometimes you bring in the flashy new toys and you forget the greatness that you have in your own locker room. And I'll talk about another guy in a second who's one of my favorite players in hockey. But I think Forsberg has the opportunity, like I said, to become a top 5, top 10 in forward in the NHL this season. I think that he's already kind of flirting with that right now. But I think that because of the hype that's going to hopefully play out on the ice with this team, that Forsberg's going to get a lot of attention, and hopefully he can stay healthy. I mean, he's also really good friends. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but he's super close with George Kittle. He and George Kittle are really good buddies. And if you already have kind of that superstar in your career, just as like from a business perspective, not necessarily the on ice part, but as a business perspective, he's already got kind of all the pieces in place to be a superstar. And I think that if he can take that jump this season on the ice, then it's kind of written in the stars that could happen. So I'm super stoked to see kind of how he does. Seems like a cool dude too. He's got a killer mustache, 30-year-old guy, Swedish, tough as nails. And he's a great hockey player. So I'm excited to see him kind of hopefully flourish this year.
Your thoughts on the blue line? Definitely want to touch on that.
Yeah. So this is, I was foreshadowing this a tiny bit, and you kind of brought it up too. So my favorite player in the entire NHL is Roman Josi. Has been for many seasons. He's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. It's forgotten a lot just because Nashville's not a big market team. But I mean, I think he should have won the Norris 3 seasons ago when Cale Makar still won it, even though he had the most points by a D-man in God knows how long. And I was pissed off that he lost it because I had a bet on him to win it, and he should have won it, in my opinion. And he had a little bit of a down year the following season, but last year he still had, I think, 85 or 86 points on a team that overperformed a lot. And if you watch this team, he is the heart and soul of this team. He's the captain of this team. He's been there from jump. And he's just such a fantastic player. So him fitting together with Brady Shea coming in, and I think that this might be one of the best partnerships that he's ever played with. PK Subban obviously was in town, which was great. And he's had a couple of other guys he played with. I think he played with Shea Weber at the very beginning of his career. So he's played with some great D-men, but this might be the best complementary piece that he's going to get to play with on the ice together, whether they end up playing one-on-one like with each other on the first D line, or if they play like kind of first and second line. I don't know how that's going to play out. That'll probably change throughout the season. But I think that for me, Roman Josi, I already bet him to win the Norris. And I think that if he can be what he's been, it's not like he has to do anything spectacular. He's been amazing the last 5 seasons. He's got like 2 more seasons, I would say, of his true prime before he starts to kind of come on the back half of his career. And with how Brady Shea can fit in from defensively, but also what he brings offensively as well, I think Roman Josi has an opportunity to be maybe one of the best and beneficial players on this team with all the pieces they brought in.
He is the second best defenseman in the NHL, in my opinion. And I will die on that hill. I think he's underrated, as crazy as that sounds, because he's still a top 5 D man. But I'll still put Makar 1. I know Quinn Hughes gets a lot of hype. Adam Fox gets a lot of hype. Hedman, I'm probably missing a few names, but just off the top of my head, I mean, I think pound for pound, with the teams that he's been on in the past, Roman Josi's probably the second best defenseman in the league, in my opinion.
I knew I liked you. Yeah.
Well, I got the hat, so I got to say it, right?
Yeah, you got
to
say
it,
it, right?
I mean it.
No, yeah. I mean, I think he does get credit. Like, it's not like he's just forgotten about completely, but because he plays in a little bit of a smaller market. I mean, Nashville doesn't get as much eyeballs as a lot of other teams, although Bridgestone Arena is one of the best places you can watch a hockey game if you've never been. But I think you're right, man. I mean, Makar probably just gets that slight tilt purely because he's younger too. So he's got a little bit more of his career in front of him, but he's just such a smart player, man. He's quarterbacks the power play. He's been so consistent. He barely misses time for injuries. He's such a great locker room leader from everything I've read about the team and everything he does for the overall franchise. And like I said, last year, the Predators kind of had an opportunity to go into full on rebuild mode. There was talks that they were going to maybe trade Philip Forsberg. There was talks that maybe not legitimate talks, but maybe you move on from Josi and send him to a contender and you kind of just fully blow it up and start over. I think it was great that they kept those 2 guys in the building, showed how much they care about this entire team, so how much those guys mean to the locker room. And Roman Josi has been that way since he got the CEO put on his chest. I think it was like 5 seasons ago, after Mike Fisher retired pretty much. And since that point, he's been, like you said, underrated, yet one of the best D-men in hockey. I'm excited to see him flourish once again this year.
I think, a great example of that retool that you can tell comes from Barry Trotz. As a Caps fan, I saw that firsthand and saw it pay off firsthand. So, hopefully you guys can get there as well. One player I know that he brought in and that he's always, I know he tried to bring him to DC is Ryan O'Reilly, who had a great year last year, ends up getting the second highest point total in his career for a single season. What does a successful year or, another step forward for him look like as a Predator here?
I think this could be maybe his best statistical season we've seen from Ryan O'Reilly in his entire career. I mean, he was great last year, like you said, but this power play has the potential to be one of the best power plays in hockey. And Ryan O'Reilly is going to be a huge beneficiary of that. I mean, him sitting in that little bumper spot, getting in front of goalies and hit with Stammer on one dot, Marcia Show kind of zipping around, Josi at the point. Like there's going to be so many opportunities for goal. I didn't even mention Forsberg. There's so many opportunities for goals on this power play. And Ryan O'Reilly could benefit from that even more than he did last year. I mean, he brought a lot of veteran leadership to this team last year, which, like I said, they had a lot of young players that they needed to step up. But O'Reilly was a guy who's been there, done that. Also, nice salt in the wound to take him away from the Blues, get him out of that terrible franchise in the Central, and kind of bring him to a team that is going to move a little bit further forward. But I mean, just a great guy, like you mentioned, and Trotz. I mean, Trotz has a huge history in Nashville, and it seems like that he really cares about this franchise and wants to bring them forward. And like you mentioned, bringing in guys that have character, have leadership ability on the ice, but also leadership ability in the locker room as well. I mean, David Poile was a really amazing general manager too, and he did that as well. And he brought a lot of splash players to Nashville. Like I said this on the last thing I talked about with the Predators, is like people are like, oh my God, the Preds brought all these new pieces to Nashville. And like, this is not the first time that's happened. I mean, this team has made some big moves before. Like I said earlier, they brought PK Subban to town. Like they've made some big trades. Brian Johansson, Matt Duchene, like I mentioned, like those guys have come to town, and those were big deals at that time and made this team, kind of sexy again. But this is the sexiest they had to be. But yeah, Ryan O'Reilly, I think, could statistically benefit sneakily, though. Not like people are going to not write headlines about Ryan O'Reilly, but I could see him maybe having his best point season. They don't have his point prop available to bet necessarily. I know this isn't super deep into betting right now, but which kind of tells you that, I think on a game to game basis, he'll be a good look for sure. And I think he has a chance to have a really great year again.
I got one last question for you before we
Sure.
get an official season prediction. One guy who had a hell of a season last year, kind of out of nowhere, Gustav Nyquist, right? This guy's career was crumbling. He hadn't cracked like 50 points in probably 7 or 8 seasons prior to coming to Nashville. And then he just comes into Nashville and gets 75 points last year and revives his career. Are you expecting like the same kind of production out of him this year? Or do you think he comes back to earth a little bit?
Well, I kind of like what I was talking about earlier with that first line. Like they carried this team, him and Forsberg being a part of that unit. And I foresee him having a similar success. And I think this is the other part too about the Stammer and Marcia Show thing coming to town. It's like, yeah, obviously they bring great, amazing stuff to the ice. Like they're spectacular players. Like I said, Hall of Famer for Stammer, maybe even Marcia Show by the end of his career. But I think what they're going to bring, especially to guys like Nyquist and some of these other younger players, is championship mentality, and like overall like consistency. Because to be great, you have to be consistent for many seasons in a row and longevity in your career. And guys can have great statistical seasons, like Nyquist coming off a 70-point season, but how can you repeat that? How do you have the gumption in yourself? Do you have it in your plums? Do you have it in yourself to kind of come back the next year and put it together again? Because that is what the definition of greatness is to me. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how they shuffle lines throughout the season. And I mean, a lot of teams in hockey, I'm sure you guys watching and following teams and, talking to a lot of other people and stuff, like, that lines are not a set of stone as they used to be. Like they're very fluid. Sometimes they change in game. The Oilers do it all the time. Like they flip guys around all the time based on what's happening on the ice. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they start the season, especially with these new pieces kind of trying to get their feet wet. I mean, Jonathan Marchessault Show, I thought it was going to take some time to handle, but I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but in the past couple preseason games, Jonathan Marchessault Show has been absolutely lighting it up. Scored a goal and 2 assists against the Bolts the other day, and then had a goal again in the last preseason game. It's preseason, but to answer your question, just to clarify, it's preseason. Let's pump the tire. Let's pump the brakes a little bit, but it's going to take some time for these dudes to settle in. Chemistry it doesn't just happen overnight. So I believe that Nyquist and some of these other guys that have been there are going to continue to flourish. And I mean, who knows? Maybe his ceiling has not even been reached yet. Maybe last year wasn't an outlier and he just needed an opportunity in a place he felt comfortable. Maybe he has a chance to even bump it up a tiny bit more. So it's a guy you kind of forget about. I'm glad you brought him up, just because of how important he was to the team last year. And I don't think that that's going to go unnoticed going into this year too.
All right. Well, time has come. We need a season prediction. How deep is this team going this year?
Oh man. Okay, so I'll do it 2 ways. I'll give you one that's kind of more of like a fan, totally not like a totally unbiased or a biased fan take. I think this team can compete to win the cup. Like I said, I really think that they can flirt with, if everything plays out, no injuries, chemistry happens, everything goes together. Maybe they make another couple moves also before the trade deadline. They got a lot of money on the cap space. They also have quite a few draft picks they can mess around with at that point too. So maybe they bring in one more splash piece, which is possible. I think they can compete to win a cup. I think they can compete to maybe be the best team in hockey for a President's Trophy. I definitely think they can compete actually to win the Central. Like that's probably my favorite angle for this team. But I think the overall, just more tempered expectation is to make a deep playoff run. I mean, you mentioned it before that this team hasn't gotten out of the first round since 2016, maybe once, like you said. I don't know that off the top of my head because sometimes I try to forget about the pain. But I I think they have a really good opportunity to make a deep playoff run. And I think with the pieces they brought together, I think Predators fans are kind of expecting them to do that. So I think anything less than a second or third round or even cup run would be a disappointment. And yeah, that's kind of my tempered versus what I want. Obviously, they're lifting the cup for me if I had to go with the fan perspective. Like, that's the move. But I think it makes sense with everything that they've done.
Hey, some people never give a tempered take, so little pat on the shoulder for actually bringing that to the table.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to, I write about hockey. I write about sports, and like, I have to, I'm a huge Tennessee Titans fan too in football. So like, I have to sometimes put my fandom aside with what I'm writing about to kind of go, okay, how do I look at this not from my blue or yellow colored glasses, just to give an actual, like, legitimate reason. So
Totally get that. Totally get that. Well,
yeah,
we appreciate the time for sure. Where can people read some of your blogs that you were just talking about?
Yeah, man, for sure. So I'm the head of content of bettingnews.com. You guys can go read all of our free content. We cover every single sport from the sports betting landscape every single day. I also host a show called Afternoon Betspresso, which is a live streaming show on YouTube and on Twitch. You guys can watch that every single day. We talk about betting. We also just talk about having fun in sports and kind of the overall vibe of the sports betting culture. So we do that show every single day. So go check it out. You can find us at bettingnews.com, like I said, and you can follow me on Twitter at sweatpantjesus or at your betting news. That's where I work as well. So lots of content. I do writing for NHL, NBA, NFL. I know this is an NHL show, but a little bit of everything. So go check it out. We have a great team of writers. We try to do good content, positive stuff about this space, and talk about sports in an environment that people enjoy. So appreciate the follow, and thanks for having me on, boys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll do it again sometime.